To do a segment where I kind of just discussed, a few different things from the show, like a few highlights from the shows in the past, in my opinion, a few just things about it in general, and just yeah, reminiscing, I guess, a bit about the 20 or so shows. It probably wasn't that many. I guess I have to look back to remember exactly. At least like between 15 to 20 shows or something like that, which isn't a lot. Although when you put it in perspective, I guess it's what 30, somewhere between 30 to 60 hours I've done this show, which I don't know if that makes it seem like that much more either, just because that's like what a day and 6 hours, at the least. So it's not really that much. But I just thought I'd go back and remember some of the bits I did, some of the things I talked about that I enjoyed the most. But I think looking back at the first episode, I remember it would have been October 14th, 2023. I don't know why I almost got the day wrong there, but I mean the year wrong there, but and I remember it was kind of funny because it was during the part of the year where the sun sets at like 4:30 or 5 or whatever. It's set before I did the show, and it was really weird being in the room I do the show in, and it was all dark. And I mean, I could have turned a light on, but I was really nervous about touching anything back then just because I didn't want to screw something up on accident. I mean, now, frankly, I really don't care that much if I do. I mean, I still try not to, obviously. I'm sure I respect the equipment and all that, but I don't. It's in terms of I just really didn't want to like play something wrong on the air or something. And I just bring it up because nowadays, or at least right now, and I know this is just the changing of the seasons. This isn't like anything because of the show, but it's still some sunlight out, and it's nearly 7:30 now. So I guess things change kind of. I just remember being kind of at first it was kind of an intimidating experience because leading up to doing the show, because it's something I've wanted to do for a long time, to host a radio show, and I hope when I leave college that's what I'm going to be doing as a job. But it was a thing where, first of all, when you're getting so close to something you've wanted to do for so long, and now it's in some capacity you're about to be doing it. But then you kind of think about, I thought I'm not really afraid of anything I'm going to say on the show. I'm not afraid of like people listening, because I thought, I mean, really, realistically, there's very few people listening to the show right now. And that's how it is still, although I thought about it, and it's, well, I think the school has something like 30,000 people here. So even if that's only like 1% of the school is listening, and even I don't even think it's that much, but something like that, then that's like 300 people still. So, and I doubt that many people are listening, but I figured it's not going to be a lot, but there's still people listening, and that kind of freaked me out, thinking about, no matter what I say, there's going to be someone listening, and what if I say something really stupid on accident? But the first show was mostly just the subjects were, if I remember correctly, the first one was talking about how this was back when Kevin McCarthy was still, or just barely not anymore, Speaker of the House. So talking about when he got removed and who they were going to replace him with. And then the next segment was talking about Hackney Diamonds a little bit before it had come out, and just my general thoughts on it. And I thought it was pretty good. I mean, they were decent segments from remembering back to that time. Although I don't know if that proves that I haven't grown at all, if I still think those segments were good, or if, that the segments were good. I'm going to probably lean towards the former if it's one of the two. But, I thought it was kind of a fun show. And I thought it was easier to kind of do the show without mistakes than I thought it would be. I thought it would be a thing where I didn't even know if people could hear me when I was doing the show. And frankly, people couldn't really, because I was barely talking all that loud when I first did. I was hardly speaking into the microphone. Now I feel like I've gotten better at that and speaking more confidently. But when I first started the show, I had no idea, what was going on. People were listening, if people cared. Like I said, not a lot of people listen. But I think I did like 10 or so of those jokes about no one's listening on the first episode. And that's my biggest problem. I guess looking back, I would have probably cut a few of those out. I mean, like I said, I don't really plan. Like when I write things down for like notes, I write down like my opinions, like what I'm going to talk about. I don't write down jokes. Those all just like come to me when I'm doing the segments. So that was just based on I had no other material to pull from. But yeah, those were two segments I did right at the beginning. Something I did a lot back then, and well, I shouldn't say back then, I still kind of do it, just less so, is I used to do a lot of repeat segments in terms of the first week I was talking about Kevin McCarthy got removed, and then the second week I talked about the continuation of trying to find a speaker. And then I don't remember if by that point I don't think they did, but the show after that I finally talked about the conclusion about Mike Johnson being the new speaker. So, it was three very similar subjects. Or I guess it was, I don't think I talked about it that week, because that was after the new Beatles. I think the third show I did was the new Beatles album came out. In fact, yeah, looking back, because of the second week I actually took a break because I was on vacation then. So the first show was the 14th of October. The second show was the 28th, so it was the conclusion of the speaker race. And then the third week was about the Beatles. So yeah, that was, never mind. I guess I completely screwed that up. But I did a lot of repeat segments, and I've done, 3 episodes now about Mike Johnson getting removed or whatever it would be. because I just think that's funny, you know, not really from a political standpoint. I just think the whole concept is funny. But I did do a lot of repeats, and I still kind of do, like I said, but I try to kind of limit it more, especially when it's like a political thing, because I don't, like I said, I've never done a political segment where I talk about like who you should vote for or what party's best or any of that crap. I'm just talking about what I think is funny. And, you know, the Speaker of the House getting removed for the first time in like 100 years or whatever, and then he gets replaced, and then the replacement by the people who, you know, put him in are talking about removing him. That's just funny, you know, objectively. And, you know, moving on from that, I think another segment that I did another repeat segment I did a lot that I think actually was one of my personal favorites was I think I did 3 or something segments on George Santos because he's just like a funny guy, you know. And I thought about doing one if this was like a normal show where I wasn't, you know, kind of wrapping things up a bit. I would have talked about this, but there's been more news about, you know, how he dropped out of the race for the Congress because if you remember, he's been removed from office, announced he was running again as the Republican. Then decided he was going to run as an independent because the Republicans are like too far to the left now or whatever. And then he changed his mind and he dropped out. So all that stuff is funny. I would have definitely talked about that had this been, you know, a normal episode where I talked about things that are going on. But, you know, that guy is, you know, a very funny political figure, you know, and the stuff he did, the first one was just about how I think it came out, the stuff with OnlyFans and all that, the corruption allegations he was facing, and then about how he resigned from office. Then I did my favorite, you know, my top 10 favorite George Santos lies. Those were some good segments. And I will say the top 10 George Santos lies, that's one of the things that, pivoting to another topic, that was the first of the top 10 lists I've done on the show. I've done quite a few top 10 lists. I don't know why, it's just a funny way to discuss. Like, they've never been serious ones, though. Well, except for maybe one or two. The ones I remember, that was the first one I did, and I thought it was a pretty funny segment. Pretty good idea. I think something funny about that is I don't really like top 10 lists as a concept, just in terms of if I was to make a serious list of top 10 favorite this or top 10 least favorite that. I like to have kind of a funny angle at it, which is why I did top 10 George Santos lies. Then I did top 10 worst Christmas gifts. That was one that I did that I think was pretty funny. It was the last show before. I call it like the Christmas special because it was the last show before Christmas. That was a pretty good segment. I did what did I do? Top 10 worst New Year's resolutions. Top 10 reasons March weather sucks. That was one of the other ones I did seriously, except for, you know, obviously sometimes there were joke topics. Like I think I made some joke about how it was probably snowing when Jesus was crucified or something. So you know, I made some jokes in it, but I never really. You know, I never, besides that, I guess I didn't give them any reasons that were not serious. I mean, sometimes with these lists, you have to really stretch for reasons for what you're going to put there, because if I'm just going to be honest now, since it's past and I'm kind of, you know, going behind the scenes a little bit, I basically did that segment because I had no other ideas for segments that week. It was a pretty slow news week, if I remember correctly. So that's why I did it. Ordinarily, I probably wouldn't have done a segment like that. But and then just recently I did the top 5 because I just couldn't think of 10 reasons. The top 5 best O.J. Simpson reasons O.J. Simpson was a great football player. And to kind of remember on that one, I will say, when talking about good segments I've done in the past, that one I remember going to bed that night kind of like, I really hope I'm able to do this show tomorrow, because that I maybe pushed things a bit too far on that one. I mean, I personally think it was funny, but I'm trying to kind of clean up my act a bit because, you know, it's radio that is when, you know, it's before midnight, I guess. I mean, I'm pretty sure the rules are that after like 10 p.m. or so, the restrictions are a lot looser. And it's not even that was a restriction, like I was breaking a restriction, but I was wondering, I know for people going to complain that I was making kind of graphic jokes about O.J. Simpson, and no one did that I saw, so I guess we're good, at least for now. So yeah, that's something, I guess. I'm lucky that I'm pretty sure people aren't listening to the show. The people at KUGR are really great with this. I mean, we'll talk more about giving people their thanks at the end, but you know, they don't listen to the show, they don't care what I'm saying, and that's really been great. So frankly, in terms of was that right to make those jokes? Maybe not, but I still look at those jokes. That was one of my favorite segments I ever did, the O.J. Simpson one. In terms of just segments I like doing, the Trump Bibles one was one of my favorites. I just feel like I was thinking of a lot of great jokes related to Donald Trump's Bible endorsement. It was just that was a great segment in my opinion. I had a lot of fun with that. I think some other segments that I did, even though this is one of the really early ones I did, one of my personal favorites was the segment I did about the second one about the Speaker of the House thing, because that was nearly like 40 minutes and it was just going on and on about, you know, how ridiculous the situation is when you really look at it, how much had happened in a 2-week time frame. Just, because people forget, but that was such a crazy time. Kevin McCarthy gets removed. Then, what's his face? Steve Scalise is the new nominee. He's not voted in. Jim Jordan becomes the next nominee. He's not voted in. Mike Johnson is the next nominee. He's not voted in. And I felt like with all the side angles I was taking with it about all this discussion of George W. Bush should be the nominee, this discussion of, a compromise nominee, which looked so unlikely, all that stuff, it was just a fun segment. And it was nearly 40 minutes. The longer segments are usually my favorites because I feel like I can just go more in depth into topics that I really like to talk about. There aren't really that many, though, that I've done. Because another one there was one episode where I did 2 pretty long segments, and that was another one of my favorite episodes. The one back in February about or maybe it was even late January, I don't really remember, but about the Taylor Swift conspiracy theories and then the Gina Carano suing Disney. Because those are just 2 segments where, again, I guess they're technically political. I mean, the Taylor Swift one kind of, I guess, because Taylor Swift is a political figure to some people. I don't really get why it has to be a divisive thing like that. But the one talking about all the conspiracies about how, it's an op, how she's become so popular, and then that the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl just because the government's rigging it because Taylor Swift's dating one of the players. And then talking about Gina Carano suing Disney because they violated her free speech by making the comparison between Jews during the Holocaust and how she was treated by Disney. Or not how she was treated by Disney, but how conservative or people of different political beliefs are treated by others with different political beliefs. I'm wording that as carefully as I can because I just want to quote it accurately. But yeah, those are some of my favorite topics. And that's what, I say I don't mind doing the shows that have a few different discussion segments in them more than just 2. To be honest, I feel like those are some of my least favorites to do just in terms of I like having these longer topics that take longer to talk about. Because those are mostly just because I can only think of a few topics that I have a little bit to say about, but not too much. This show, I feel like I had a list of things I would have talked about had it not been for wanting to kind of, round things off a bit. So, maybe, and the TikTok segment I kind of shortened a bit to just the bare essentials of what I wanted to talk about because of that. But next year we'll be going more in depth with things. We'll be doing a lot more of those in depth segments. I hope that's what I plan. I have some ideas for things that I know I'll be talking about next year, so we'll be doing that. Another segment I really liked doing was I enjoyed the first one where I called it on the YouTube channel where I post the highlights. The grab bag is what I called it because it was just a collection of small topics. I know I just said it sounds like a contradiction that I said I don't like talking about smaller topics because I like going in depth with things. I enjoyed that one because these were all things that only took like 2 or 3 minutes to talk about, and I just lumped them together. And including when I was on the news, because that's just, a really funny circumstance that I got on TV. And I don't know if it's going to ever happen again. Probably not. Well, probably not in the near future, but I guess who knows what's going to happen. But that was just a really fun segment to talk about those things. And also to talk about, following up on Robert F. Kennedy Jr., choosing his running mate. That was another top 10 list I forgot about, which some people weren't happy. That's the only time there have been times where people might dislike some of the videos on YouTube, which I understand. But I will say that one was one where the only time I ever got a response that was negative about that one, someone wasn't a fan of my opinions on that. And I'm just saying, look, that one, he could have chosen any of those people. I'm still defending that. I don't see why that was such a bad take, but whatever. I haven't talked about him in a while, and I'm not going to again. But another segment I really like doing, we'll name a few more before we finally wrap things up, is poetically the last one I did on the last show, the HempFest interview. Because that's something I'm going to do next semester. I'm going to do a lot more interviews with people because that's kind of what I envisioned for the show initially, and I just haven't been able to do it because I've always just never been able to make the time. I have a pretty busy personal life, honestly. And I don't mean in terms of every weekend, you can see me scoring at the clubs or whatever. I just mean in terms of I just have a lot of work I'm doing all the time. I don't really have that much time to prepare for the show as it is. So it was always something I kind of shied away from, but now I'm trying to get back. I'm trying to get into that. I'll probably be doing some more next semester. At least I plan to. And that was a fun segment to do. It was about an interesting topic, and I'm glad we were able to talk about it. And those are the kind of interviews I want to do with people doing things that are interesting. I mean, not just people who are putting on events or whatever, people who have something interesting to talk about. And it was nice of Arlene, who I spoke to make the time to speak for an interview, even though it was after the event that we were. Because ordinarily interviews like that are for promotion for an event, and I was just interested in talking about the event in general. So that was very nice of her. So I appreciate that, and we're going to be doing more interviews like that in the future. And I will say, just in general, a few other segments that I really I will say something I wanted to comment on is that this isn't a segment I didn't like doing, but I find it funny that I looked at what the most viewed segment on the YouTube channel was. And by most viewed, it was 200 views or whatever. So not a lot, but is when I talked about the Garfield movie for 30 minutes. back in November. That's kind of the funny thing where I've been doing this show for so long, I forget segments I've done now. I honestly completely forgot I even did that segment, and it was a fun. I mean, it was kind of a fun segment, but looking back, it's I thought it's kind of weird that was that was also the most positive response I got for one because I had a good amount of likes and I think some like positive comments about it. So I'm glad people enjoyed that one, but I don't really get what it was about that one. I guess people who were interested in the Garfield movie. I know it's people who watch the segments usually aren't people like subscribed to the YouTube channel want to know what I'm talking about because I think the YouTube channel only has like 5 or 6 subscribers, so not really a lot. I mean, I'm happy with that considering that it's a college radio show and that there is anyone subscribed to it, but I will say that if people like it, obviously I'm not going to criticize them for it, but I'm glad that was one they liked. And just to let you know, I did do some really funny segments on O.J. Simpson and the solar eclipse if you want to watch those too, but I guess not. But yeah, I mean, I guess those are just some of the main segments I wanted to talk about when looking back to what, was some of the highlights of the show. And I guess just one other segment I'd like to point out as a particular highlight for me was the eclipse segment from, I guess it would have been 2 shows ago. Just because I don't know, I thought it was really funny the whole joke of people calling in and just screaming the whole time. I wish I planned it out better though because that was the first time I've done like a sketch or whatever if you want to call it that on the show, and that's another thing I'm going to probably do more of next semester. But which is why I say because I keep talking about changes I'm going to make next semester. It is going to be a different show, but some ways the same. I'm already kind of thinking about things I'm going to change for next semester. I think this was a good trial run for how to do a radio show, and next semester, because if I'm going to be honest, and I'm not trying to be like negative now that it's over for the semester, I don't feel like I ever really truly nailed completely how I wanted to do this show. But for next semester, I have some better ideas of what I'm going to do, and I think next semester I think it's been a good show overall, but next semester is when I want to really make it a exceptional show, if that's what you want to call it, at least for what it is. And I had brought up that the eclipse segment, I think that was I thought it was just a funny idea. Yeah, it could have been executed better, but that's another one of my favorite subjects to cover, where it's just this general topic, like an eclipse happening, and more just talking about things that are happening, how people respond to it, general facts about it. And those are some of my favorite segments to do. And I bring up, the movie segments, like the Garfield movie. Those are just talking about like news and pop culture is usually, I mean, I'll do it if I think it's worth talking about, but it's probably one of the lesser subjects I like talking about. I just enjoy talking about things more current events news, if that makes sense. But there's some times where something's being talked about or rumored or whatever, and I just feel I want to talk about it, so I will. But again, I mean, those are the segments that most people like, I guess. So I'm not trying to put them down or anything. But yeah, just thought I'd say, I can't say for sure, but unless something really big happens with like movie news or whatever next semester, don't expect a lot of discussion around that.